He gave a crying stranger his last sandwich in a diner. Weeks later, her lawyers showed up at his door. The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days straight in Clover Falls, Georgia. It was the kind of southern storm that didn't announce itself politely, and it just arrived, heavy and relentless, turning the red clay roads into rivers and pressing down on everything like a hand that refused to let go. The sky was the color of old iron. The trees along Route 9 bent sideways in the wind, and the people of Clover Falls did what small-town people always do in bad weather. They stayed home, stayed quiet, and waited it out. Marcus Webb was not one of those people. He pulled his dented gray pickup into the parking lot of Patty's Diner at 7:14 in the morning, the same way he had every Tuesday for the past 4 years. The truck's windshield wipers were working overtime, squeaking with every pass. He sat there for a moment after turning off the engine, just listening to the rain hammer the roof, a sound that was almost peaceful, if you weren't already exhausted. He grabbed his jacket off the passenger seat, the same worn dark jacket he'd owned since before Diana got sick, and jogged across the wet asphalt to the diner entrance. Same cracked leather booth by the window. Same black coffees, no cream, no sugar. Same turkey sandwich on white bread. The $4.99 breakfast special that Carla always brought without him having to ask. He'd learned to eat slow to make it last, because on the mornings when the contracting work was slow and the bills were loud, that sandwich sometimes became lunch too. Lately the bills were always loud. Marcus Webb was 34 years old, and he was tired in a way that sleep didn't fix. He was a single father of 2, Emma, age 7, who collected butterfly stickers and talked to her stuffed animals like they had opinions, and Noah, age 9, who had his mother's eyes and his father's stubbornness, and had recently decided he was going to play professional soccer whether the universe agreed or not. His wife Diana had passed away 2 years ago. A sudden illness, the kind that blindsides you on a random Wednesday in February, gives you no warning, no preparation, no chance to say everything you should have said years earlier. 1 month she was packing Noah's lunch and helping Emma learn to tie her shoes. 6 weeks later she was gone. Marcus had kept the house. He'd kept the kids in the same school, the same neighborhood, with the same friends, because Diana always said that children need roots, even when everything else is falling apart. But keeping the roots meant stretching every dollar until it was nearly transparent. It meant working weekends. It meant skipping dinners, skipping new clothes, skipping everything that wasn't absolutely essential. It meant that a $4.99 turkey sandwich on a Tuesday morning sometimes felt like the one indulgence he allowed himself all week. He slid into his booth, nodded at Carla, and let his eyes drift to the rain-soaked parking lot outside. A white car sat crookedly near the edge of the lot, one tire halfway over the curb, like someone had parked in a hurry or a panic. He noticed it but didn't think much of it. That's when he noticed her. She was sitting 2 booths away, and she looked like she had walked through the storm on foot. Her hair, blonde, long, was completely soaked, pressed flat against her face and neck. Her green cardigan sweater was torn at the shoulder, a long ragged tear that exposed the fabric underneath. Her hands were wrapped around a glass of water, holding it like it was the only solid thing in the world. And she was crying, not the quiet, carefully managed kind of crying that people do in public when they're trying to be invisible about it. She was really crying, shoulders shaking, eyes swollen, the kind of crying that comes from somewhere deep and doesn't care who's watching. In front of her, just the water, no food, no coffee, nothing else. Carla walked over to the woman's booth and bent down, saying something in a low voice. Marcus watched the woman shake her head. Carla said something else. The woman shook her head again, more firmly this time, and looked down at the table. Marcus had been in enough hard places in his life to read that exchange without hearing a single word. He knew what it looked like when someone was hungry and too proud, or too broken to ask for help. He'd made that same face himself, sitting in a hospital waiting room, trying to figure out if he could make it to payday before the card got declined. Carla came back to the counter and set Marcus's plate down in front of him. Turkey sandwich, home fries, hot black coffee. The smell alone was enough to make his stomach remind him that he hadn't eaten since yesterday evening. He looked at the plate. He looked at the woman 2 booths over, still staring at her glass of water, tears sliding silently down her face. He picked up the plate. He walked over, set it down gently on the table in front of her, and said the first thing that came to his mind, something simple, something that gave her an exit from embarrassment. "I already ate this morning," he said. "This is just going to go to waste if somebody doesn't take it." It was a lie, a small, necessary, kind lie. The woman looked up at him. Up close, her eyes were green, red-rimmed from crying, but sharp and intelligent underneath the exhaustion. She looked at him the way people look at strangers who surprise them, like she was trying to figure out the angle, the catch, the hidden cost. She opened her mouth to say no. He could see it forming. "Please," Marcus said quietly. He pulled his hand back and stood up straight, giving her space. "My wife used to say that letting good food go cold is a sin." He paused. She was usually right about things like that. Something shifted in the woman's expression. The resistance went out of her like air from a tire. She looked at the sandwich again, and this time she didn't argue. She nodded, barely, just barely, and whispered 2 words. "Thank you." Marcus went back to the counter. He ordered just the coffee. He didn't look over at her booth again, not because he didn't care, but because he understood that some kindnesses need to be given quietly, without an audience, without a spotlight. He drank his coffee, left a $5 bill under the mug for Carla, pulled on his jacket and walked back out into the rain. He didn't give her his name. He didn't ask for hers. He didn't wait to be thanked a second time. It was just a sandwich. It wasn't heroic. It wasn't a sacrifice that deserved recognition. It was simply what a decent human being does when they see another human being struggling and they happen to have something to give. He drove to his job site and spent 8 hours in the rain patching a roof. Life continued the way it always did, forward, without pausing for sentiment. He picked up Noah from soccer practice on Thursday and listened to a 20-minute breakdown of why the referee had made 3 objectively wrong calls. He helped Emma finish a science project about butterfly migration that ended up being mostly Emma's ideas and Marcus's glue gun skills. He took an extra weekend job fixing fence posts along a property line out on the far edge of Route 9. Hard work. Quiet work. The kind that left his hands sore but his mind empty in a way that almost felt like peace. He thought about the woman in the diner once, maybe twice. Hoped she was okay, moved on. That's what you do when your days are full and your margins are thin. You do a small good thing and you keep moving. Because the kids need dinner and the mortgage doesn't care about your feelings. 3 weeks passed. On a Tuesday morning, again a Tuesday, always a Tuesday, Marcus was standing at his kitchen sink drinking coffee and watching. Emma tried to convince the family cat that her backpack was not a bed. When he heard a knock at the front door, firm, professional, not the knock of a neighbor, he opened the door to find 2 men in dark suits standing on his porch. Both of them were dry, which meant they had an umbrella and a plan. The taller one had silver at his temples and the kind of calm, expensive posture that comes from decades of being the most prepared person in any room. "Mr. Webb," the man said. "My name is Daniel Holt. I'm a senior partner with Holt and Parrish Law Group, based out of Atlanta. My colleague is James Parrish. We represent a private client who has asked us to locate you." Marcus looked at them. Then he looked past them at the black car parked at the curb. Car that cost more than he made in a year. "Locate me," he repeated. "For what?" "May we come inside?" They sat at his kitchen table. Emma's butterfly drawings were still taped to the wall beside the refrigerator. Noah's cleats were sitting by the back door, caked in dry mud. The kitchen smelled like coffee and dish soap, and the particular lived in warmth of a home where children grow up. The attorney slid a folder across the table. He folded his hands and spoke carefully, the way lawyers do when they want you to hear every word. "Our client's name is Catherine Ellison. 3 weeks ago, she found herself in Clover Falls, under difficult circumstances she has asked us not to detail publicly. She was at Patty's diner on a Tuesday morning. She was in significant distress. She had no money, no phone, and no one she could call." Marcus set down his coffee mug. "A man approached her booth," Mr. Holt continued. "He gave her his breakfast. He said something to her about his wife, something she found meaningful. And then he left before she had any opportunity to thank him or learn his name. The attorney paused. Ms. Ellison hired us to find that man. It took us 2.5 weeks, the second attorney, Parrish, added. We identified the diner, spoke with the waitress on duty, a Ms. Carla Simmons, who remembered the interaction clearly and gave us your name. Marcus stared at the folder without opening it. Something was tightening in his chest, but it wasn't fear. It was something harder to name. I just gave her a sandwich, he said. His voice came out quieter than he intended. It was $4.99. It wasn't. He stopped. It was nothing. Daniel Holt looked at him steadily. Mr. Webb, he said, I have represented Catherine Ellison's family for 11 years. I have seen her navigate boardroom negotiations worth hundreds of millions of dollars without flinching. I have never, not once, seen her hire a 2-person legal team and spend 2.5 weeks locating a stranger over nothing. He nodded at the folder again. Please open it. Inside was a cashier's check and a handwritten letter on cream-colored stationery, with no letterhead, just Catherine's handwriting, careful and deliberate, like every word had been chosen twice. Marcus looked at the check first. He read the number once, then again, then a third time, because the first 2 times his brain simply refused to accept it as real. There were more zeros than he had ever seen attached to his name in any context, in any document, in his entire life. His hands were very still on the table. Then he read the letter. Dear Marcus, I don't know if you'll remember me. I was the wet, crying woman in the torn green sweater. I know I wasn't much to look at that morning. I had just left a situation that had taken almost everything from me. My confidence, my sense of direction, very nearly my will to keep going. I had been driving for hours without a destination. I pulled into that parking lot because the rain was too heavy to see through, and I couldn't drive anymore. I sat in that booth for a long time before you walked over, long enough to decide quietly that I didn't know how I was going to get back up. You didn't ask me what was wrong. You didn't make me explain myself or perform some version of acceptable sadness. You put food in front of me without conditions, told me a small story about your wife, and walked away before I could turn it into something complicated. I want you to know I sat in that booth for 2 more hours after you left. I ate every bite of that sandwich, and somewhere between the first bite and the last, I remembered who I was, not who I had been told to be, not who I was afraid I'd become, who I actually am. My name is Catherine Ellison. My family founded Ellison Capital Group 40 years ago. I have resources that most people will never see in their lifetimes. But on that morning in that diner, I was simply a broken woman who needed one person to be kind, without wanting anything in return. You were that person. I am not asking for your friendship, your time, or your gratitude. I have no interest in making you feel indebted or uncomfortable. I simply cannot, in good conscience, allow a man who gave away his last meal, a man raising 2 children alone, to continue struggling when I have the ability to change that with almost no effort on my part. Please use this however you and your children need. For the house, for their school, for yourself, for something that has nothing to do with survival and everything to do with living. And please, if it isn't too much to ask, give Emma and Noah a hug from a stranger who has been quietly rooting for all 3 of you since a rainy Tuesday morning in Georgia, with more gratitude than I know how to properly express. Catherine. The attorneys left quietly. They didn't ask for anything. They didn't leave a card. They simply showed themselves out while Marcus sat at his kitchen table and didn't move for a very long time. He wasn't thinking about the money. Not yet. That would come later, slowly and carefully. The way he did everything that mattered. He was thinking about Diana. About how she used to say that kindness isn't a transaction. That you don't give it expecting something back. You give it because the world is short on it, and you happen to be standing in the right place at the right moment. He was thinking about how close he had come to not going to the diner that morning. He'd been tired. The rain had been bad. He'd told himself he'd just make toast at home and skip it, but something had made him pull into that parking lot. He looked up at Emma's butterfly drawings on the refrigerator. He heard Noah's alarm going off down the hall. His son, already awake on his own, already moving, already becoming the kind of person his mother would have been proud of. Marcus Webb wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. He took one long, slow breath. Then he stood up, went to the stove, and started making breakfast. He made eggs. He made toast. He made enough for 3, more than enough with some left over. For the first time in a very long time, he wasn't thinking about how to make it stretch. Some mornings, the smallest decision, the choice to be kind when you have almost nothing left to give, and becomes the very thing that changes everything, not just for the stranger you helped, for yourself.